Hey, what's going on, guys? It's FPL Yusuf here, and welcome back to another video on my YouTube channel. Today, I'm coming at you with part 3 of this mini series that we've had going over, where we're looking at goalkeepers, defenders, midfielders, and now for today's video, we're going to be moving on to the attackers. We're going to look at different players from different price ranges, just to try and give you guys the most information around picking your game week 1 team. So, without further ado, let's get into the video. Okay, welcome back, guys, to another video on my YouTube channel. Thank you so much for being here. Just quickly before we get into this video, if you wouldn't mind dropping a like down below and subscribing if you're new around here, it'd be greatly appreciated. So, if you guys have been following this series so far, this is the third part of our 3-part series where we go over all different types of positions for all different players for all different price ranges. We look at everything from cheap options all the way up to the premiums, and just to try and decide who really gives us that best bang for buck and who is the most efficient in terms of price ranges. So forwards, we're going to start off with the cheap options. Now, I've priced the forwards from 6.5 million under as cheap. Now, the reason I've done that is because, as you'll see when we move on to the midsection, there's so many strikers who are between 7 and 7.5 million. I've just grouped them all up as the mid. So for this part of the section, for the cheaper options, I've done everyone from 6.5 million and under. So we'll start off with the most expensive one of these cheap options, and that is Matthias Cunha from Wolves. Now, he's coming in at 6.5 million. So like I said, he's the most expensive one out of the cheap options. He has expected goal involvement of 0.46, which is almost either a goal or an assist every 2 games. I think for a Wolves striker, I don't think that's too bad. I think obviously his stats would be higher, but obviously Pedro Neto and Hwang were obviously injured for parts of last season, which I think does bring his value down a little bit. I think if Wolves are starting with their full strength attack, I think he's definitely a good option. Wolves have got a mixed bag of opening fixtures. They've got some decent games, some not so great. Obviously, they go away to Arsenal on the opening day of the season, which obviously isn't fantastic for him, especially because of Arsenal's defence. So maybe I wouldn't look at getting him in my game week 1 team. But I think definitely throughout the season that there will be points that you'll want to own him based on Wolves' little group of fixtures. So yeah, he's coming up first, the most expensive on this list. Okay, the middle bracket of this now. So we're going to start off with the £6 million strikers, and we're going to start with Rodrigo Muniz from Fulham. Now, this is someone who currently at the time of recording is in my current draft, which I'm going to get up to you guys hopefully at some point this week. But he is in there for a couple of reasons, really. Number one, Fulham actually start off the season with quite good fixtures. So they go away to Man United first, which I don't actually think is as bad as what it may sound like. I think, in years gone past, we still have the thought of going away to Old Trafford as this difficult fixture, which, on any given day, it can be. However, I do think Fulham are building a team which I think are going to be able to compete and start to push up the table a little bit. They're talking about signing Smith Rowe from Arsenal, which I think for them will be a great addition. Provide a little bit more creativity to their attack, which obviously is only going to help Rodrigo Muniz going forward. Now, I think for me, he is sort of cemented himself as Fulham's starting striker. I think there was times last season where was it Raul Jimenez, was it Rodrigo, but then he went on that little run of like sort of 7-8 games where every game he was just getting a goal, every game he was getting some sort of attack in return. And when you're paying a sort of £6 million price for him, he's not going to break the bank and he's not groundbreaking, but I think he is someone who can tick over a nice 6 to 8 points on any given week. And like I said, when it comes to this sort of price range, there are games that you'll be able to bench him for another midfielder or for another defender, depending on how your team's set up. So yeah, I put Muniz in here, coupled up with Chris Wood, who also is coming in at 6 million. Now, he's actually had a very good start to pre-season for Forest. And do you know what? I put him kind of like in that same bracket as Muniz, as he could be a decent third option striker. I think most people are probably going to play 3-4-3 and are going to have a cheaper option, especially if you've gone for like a Haaland and Salah double up. And I think he's such a viable option as well. Nottingham Forest have started off pre-season well. I do expect them to be a lot better than they were last year. I think, Nuno's sort of been there now for a little while, so he would have managed to get his sort of style and his philosophy going under. But I think the way Chris Wood sort of leads the Nottingham Forest attack, I just personally think that the pieces he's got around him, Hudson-Odoi, Morgan Gibbs-White, I think that they will create chances for him. And the same thing as Muniz at Fulham. Nottingham Forest actually have very, very good fixtures starting off the season. So I think that sort of plays into his hands as well. So yeah, for me, Chris Wood and Muniz, I don't think there's really much separating them two, to be honest with you. And I think if you are, looking for that third choice striker, maybe a little bit on the cheaper side, I think both of them are viable options. Right, so fourth on the list, João Pedro coming in at 5.5. Now, he actually on this list has got the highest expected goal involvements at 0.74. Partly, I think that's because of he's obviously a penalty taker and is a very good one at that. He was in my initial draft, my first draft that I made on the channel. He was in there going into this season. Currently, I don't have him in there, and I think that's partly because I want to see A, where he plays. Is he going to play off the left or is he going to play as the number 9? But B, I want to see how regular his minutes are going to be. I think that was the biggest problem with him last season, was he was sort of being chopped and changed a lot by De Zerbi. Now, that went for a few different positions. You know, the goalkeeper was one. I think De Zerbi sort of chopped and changed his team quite a lot. So it was very difficult to sort of nail down an actual starting player from there. Everyone else, there was always a risk of rotation. Whereas under their new manager now, hopefully, you'd imagine that they sort of have 4 or 5 key players that are going to play every week. And I think João Pedro, I do expect him to be one of them. I think with him, I just need some time to see A, where he plays, B, how he plays in this system, and then also just, you know, just to wait and see what everyone else around his sort of price bracket does as well. Because, you know, there's only 0.5 difference between, you know, the likes of Muniz and Chris Wood. And I do think they just have a little bit more of an upside at the moment. So, yeah, João Pedro coming in at number 4. Good player, you know, is on penalties as well. But I think for him, for at least for the time being, it's just a wait and see moment. And finally, coming in at 5 million, dead on, the cheapest striker on this list is Yusuf Chamiti. It's ironic, he's actually got my name. But he's actually started off Everton's pre-season very well. And he's someone who was at the club last season. I think Everton just struggled to find a number 9. You know, Calvert-Lewin, when he did play last season, didn't really look like how we've seen him gone in previous seasons. So I think Everton are kind of looking for that focal point up front. Maybe this could be his year. I think the reason why I've got him on here is because I wanted to give like an alternative option that is less like dirt cheap. So that someone who is going to get minutes and you've got them ticking over points on the bench. But are you going to play him every week? Most probably not. But he has started preseason really well for Everton. You know, I think he's got 2 goals so far in it. So yeah, maybe this could be a season where Everton actually sort of bring the best out of him and sort of get a number. I think that was the biggest problem, is that they struggled to find a number 9 who was going to sort of incorporate everything that they wanted to do. So yeah, maybe this is his season. I have put him last on this list for a reason. This list isn't in any sort of particular order, but it's fitting that he is last because he is someone there who, if you are going to bring him in, it's probably just as a budget enabler. So that is all of our cheaper options done. As we said, it's from 6.5 million and under. We're going to now move into the mid-range prices, which is from 7 to 7.5 million. Okay, so we're going to move on to the mid-range forwards now. So like I said in my previous part of the video, I've priced these at anywhere between 7 and 7.5 million. The reason why is because there are just so many options between these two price brackets. I think if I started including people lower or people higher, I mean, we had less premiums and also less cheap options as well. So I've just kept it in a very small bracket here of a price range, but because there's so many options. So we'll start off with the only one on this list who is actually at 7 million. So we're going to start off with the cheapest this time, and that is Rasmus Højlund. Now he's up and running. Obviously scored against Arsenal in the preseason friendly. They lost 2-1, but he did look all right. He looked lively. I think I expect a lot more from Rasmus Højlund this year for Manchester United. Now I know Højlund's going to have competition with Xerxes, and that was another player who I was potentially thinking about. But the thing with these two is they're both priced at 7 million, so it works either way. I think obviously the more preseason games we see, the more we'll see who's going to be the main starter. I don't know if Xerxes actually linked up with the squad yet. But yeah, for me, I put Højlund down here because I do think he will be the number 1. I think Xerxes can also play a number 10 role. So I think Rasmus Højlund will be their man who's starting. You know, Manchester United got sort of a mixed bag of fixtures to start the season off as well. There's nothing amazing, nothing terrible. It's sort of somewhere in between. So I think Højlund, for me, you know, last season he had a little bit of a purple patch about halfway through the season where he was getting goals sort of like, I think he scored about 6 or 7 games in a row, but it sort of dried up for the rest of the season after that. So I think I do expect a lot more from him this season, and also a lot more consistency as well. So yeah, I think for me, he's going to be on the list as the only £7 million price forward. Like I said, the other 4 on this list are going to be at 7.5 million. And we're going to start off with Ivan Toney now. Coming in, obviously I said 7.5 million, 0.45 expected goal involvements. Now, obviously his sample size is a lot smaller because he missed, you know, pretty much the first sort of 4 or 5 months of the season, obviously due to the whole betting scenario thing. So I think his sample size is a lot smaller. Now, there are links with him going to Spurs, and I think if he, right now for Brentford, I touched on this in the midfielder part. With Mbeumo there, I think that there's still a question to be asked whether you go for one or the other. I think if Toney gets the move away and he gets a move to like a Spurs, I also saw West Ham being in consideration around that. I think if he gets a move to someone else, I think he's going to be a starter for everyone. I think people will find the budget to make him the third striker. You know, he'll be on penalties regardless of where he goes, and he doesn't miss from them. So he's always got that route to point, which is what got him his 20 goals. I think not last season, the season before. So for me, he's obviously got a nice route to points, but he's also a very good player as well. And I think at 7.5 million, if he does go to another team, maybe a team with a few more players around him that can sort of create more chances for him, I think he's just gold dust, you know. So yeah, for me, Ivan Toney going to be in there on this list, coming in at 7.5. Also joining is another player who I look at in quite a similar regard actually, and that's Dominic Solanke. Now his expected goal involvement is a little bit higher at 0.59. I do think for Bournemouth, he's obviously the main man. Like Bournemouth don't really get that many penalties, but obviously when they do, he is on them. A little bit unfortunate with his slip last year for his penalty, but I think again he's going to have another good year. Bournemouth, they're one of these teams that they play nice football. They'll lose games, but they'll also win games. I think he, over the course of the season, for 7.5 million, I think he sort of justifies his price tag. If he did get move away to someone else, I think obviously people will be looking at him a lot more. Bournemouth obviously don't start off great this season with fixture wise, so I think there's probably an argument to be made. Maybe you bring him in down the line. If you're somebody who's going to look at wild carding early, or the way the transfers work this year by racking up transfers, I think maybe sort of around game week 5, game week 6 is when you could sort of target these type of players here, like Dominic Solanke. But I think overall, as I said, 7.5 million, he will do the job that you've got him in for, and I think he will justify his price tag come the end of the season. Now, another player that we're going to talk about is Mateta, and he, for me, I don't know if game week 1 he'll be ready. Now, obviously, he obviously went to the Olympics with France, which means he's going to have an extended period of leave when he comes back from that. I don't know whether or not he's going to be ready for game week 1 now. Obviously, we all saw how he finished the season last year. The last 10 games, he was absolutely brilliant. There is a question mark over, is he on penalties? Is it Eze? I don't think we'll know that until we see both of them on the pitch and see who actually gets the penalty. But I think with the way Crystal Palace play, I didn't expect him to get that much of a price rise, but I still think he's worth it. The Palace, with the 2 wing backs, they get high up the pitch. Eze will create chances for him. I touched on it in the midfield part of last video, with Daichi Kamada. I think he will create chances for him. So I think Mateta is a good pick. Palace have got a decent opening run of fixtures, so it's nothing too bad. I think my only concern around Mateta is he going to be ready to start game week 1 after finishing off the Olympics with France? I don't know. We saw talking about Pep's and his City boys, who obviously went far in the Euros. They're not going to be available for pre-season for them. So I think a lot of people are going to be looking at those type of players. Rodri, Walker, Stones, Foden. Some of them may start game week 1. It might be till game week 2 before you start seeing them introduced. I think that is always a thing when you've got players who have not sort of started pre-season the same time as everyone else. There's always something you have to consider. And I think that's my only reservation around Mateta. I don't think his price is a problem. I think it's just whether or not he'll be ready for game week 1. And the final player in the 7.5 million bracket is Nicholas Jackson. Now, he is somebody who I think frustrated a lot of us last season. Chelsea obviously had a good start to the season last year in terms of fixture-wise, but he didn't really pop the numbers that maybe a lot of us thought he would. And it's very similar for them this year. Now, obviously, they start off their season against Manchester City, which, I don't think anyone's expecting Chelsea to sort of win that game, if we're being honest. But from game week 2 onwards, it's the same as last year where Chelsea's fixtures swing. However, I have not been impressed with them at all in preseason. They look very shaky. And Kunku's the only one that I could say, going forward looks like he's about it. The rest of them, maybe their new striker, Guehi, I think I think that's how you pronounce it. He's only 5 million. I didn't put him in the last list because I don't know whether he'll start or not. But he looks like he's had a little bit of something about him. His hold-up play's good. But Jackson, once again, it's a risk with him. And I think for the price tag that he's coming in at, it's not like you could value him as like a cheap 6.5, 6 million. It's an extra million. I think with the way budget works this year and everything's so tight, I just don't know whether he is the right man to be spending, 7.5 million on someone who, we can't really rely on finishing wise. And even with the good fixtures, we just don't know how Chelsea are going to play. So yeah, for me, I think this price bracket for me, just speaking about all of them, there's some players I haven't included here, Callum Wilson, Gabriel Jesus. And it's the reason why they're not in this list is, again, it's just due to minutes. I can't guarantee whether or not they're going to start. So yeah, for me, I think this sort of range, for me, it just isn't. There's not really that many options that I would look at and say, yeah, do you know what, they could be a banker on my team. I think most people will end up either going for the premiums, Watkins, Isak, Haaland, which we're going to move on to in a second, or like a really cheaper option, Rodrigo Muniz, a Chris Wood, someone like that. So yeah, these are just some options for you guys, if you are considering looking at them. But I think, the premiums or the cheap options are probably going to be where most people go. Okay, now the premiums. There's only 4 on this list, as you guys can see, so not really many available to us for forwards. We're going to start off with Kai Havertz. Now, I just touched on this just a minute ago with Jesus. For me, I like Havertz. I like him as a player. I like what he can do. He can get you a goal. He can get you an assist. Gabriel Jesus has looked very sharp for Arsenal in pre-season, and I do think there's going to be a lot more rotation this year with Arsenal up front. I think one of the biggest criticisms Arsenal had last year was they played the same 11 over and over again. And it's partly one due to squad depth. I don't think we really had the quality coming off the bench that could necessarily replace our starters. Whereas this season, I think, we bolstered the defence a little bit more. There is talks about Arsenal looking at Mikel Merino for the midfield. There's obviously always links with Arsenal forwards because everyone knows that that's the one position that Arsenal don't have right now. But I think with Gabriel Jesus, he can sort of play across the line, so he can play through the 9, on the right or on the left. Havertz, for me, I don't think it's in Arsenal's team unless he's playing up front. I just don't think he's good enough to play in that number 8 role alongside Odegaard. I think, they'll leave it as Rice, Odegaard and Jorginho. depending if they get Mikel Merino. So for me, Havertz, good pick. But I'm just a little bit uncertain about his minutes. I think he will start the season. Hopefully, fingers crossed, he'll get off to a good start. Wolves is, you'd imagine, a favourable fixture for Arsenal to start the season. So I don't think there's anything wrong with necessarily picking him. I'd just be wary that there is possible rotation with minutes this year with more of the Arsenal players. Okay, coming in 8.5 million, I think this is someone who is going to be in everyone's draft, and that is Alexander Isak. As you can see, his expected goal involvement is crazy. 0.92, nearly averaging a sort of goal and assist every game, and for 8.5 million. It's just a no-brainer. Newcastle's started fixtures for the first sort of 5, 6, 7 weeks they're incredible. It's just all greens. Isak I think has got that number 9 spot nailed now. I think at points last season there was rotation with Callum Wilson, but I think it's unanimous now that Isak is their number 9. He is the main guy. Gordon off the left, the right hand side will sort of take care of itself. So for me, Isak will be on penalties for Newcastle as well, which is the other big thing. It's an extra route to points for him. I think he's just going to be someone that I think if you don't own him from the start, I think there's a big chance that you could start to fall behind early. So for me, if anyone out there who's looking at possibly not getting him, this is one player that I would say just put in your squad. 8.5 million, I think he offers great value for money. I think he's been a little bit underpriced, actually, to be honest with you. So yeah, for me, Isak, without question, is one of the first names on the team sheet this year. Okay, next up is Ollie Watkins, coming in at 9 million. Maybe a little bit higher than I think a lot of people would expect. I think most people probably would have thought that it would have been around the same as Isak, maybe a little bit lower. Had a fantastic season last year. We all know how good he was with 20 plus goals, 10 plus assists. My one concern with Ollie Watkins is, as you can see on screen, his expected goal involvement is only 0.58, despite getting all those returns. He massively overperformed his XG last year, especially with the assists. I think he was expected to get 4 assists and ended up on, I think it was like 16 or something. It was crazy. He overperformed massively. Will he repeat that again? I think with Watkins, he'll get goals. I think, you're looking at sort of 10 to 15 at a bare minimum. So he'll score goals in that Aston Villa side. Whether he'll repeat the heights of last season, I'm a little bit more sceptical on, which for me is something I've been umming and ahhing about. Do I want him in my team, or could you look elsewhere to sort of cover Aston Villa's goals, but also to cover that third striker spot? I think Watkins is a fine pick. It's sort of the same as Isak. He has a great start to the season. Arsenal game week 2 is a little bit of a tricky one, but other than that, they're sort of greens across the board. So for me, I don't think he's necessarily a bad option. I think Watkins is someone you get in if you don't own Haaland. I think if you own Haaland, you own Isak. I don't know whether financially you'll be able to afford Watkins as a third striker unless you go without like a Salah or a Palmer. And then I don't know if your team becomes a little bit too top heavy. So he's on there, but I think I'd rather have an Isak over the likes of Watkins, just for at least for the start of the season anyway, just to see how teams sort of get underway. And finally, the most expensive player in FPL history, coming in at 15 million, is Erling Haaland. I suppose when you have an expected goal involvement of over 1, he's coming at 1.12, the highest out of anyone in FPL. Beats Salah, beats Palmer, beats Saka, beats all of them. I suppose you've got to pay the premium. Now, my first draft, I actually didn't have Haaland in it, and I thought, okay, you know what? Maybe there is a way. Chelsea of the opening game, not the greatest. Obviously, I think the biggest fear for a lot of people was the Ipswich in game week 2. However, after watching Chelsea in pre-season, how badly they've been defensively, I'm actually a little bit worried about not owning Haaland. So at my time of recording, my current draft does actually have Erling Haaland back in there. So I think, look, he's going to be a captaincy choice most weeks, which is obviously a benefit for owning someone like Erling Haaland. City will continue to score goals. They've just signed a new Brazilian winger who I think will cause defenses problems, which means more opportunities for Haaland to score. He had the most shots on target last season, as I spoke about in my rule video, which for bonus points is going to be a big plus as well. So for me, I think Erling Haaland, I know 50 million is a lot, but I think he's worth it. And I think for me, at the start when the FPL first got released, I wasn't sure about owning him. I thought, maybe you could spread the money elsewhere across the team better. But I had this real big fear that Haaland's going to start the season very well. Chelsea aren't looking great, followed by Ipswich at home, which, I think if all goes to plan, if you don't own Haaland, you could drop serious points. I think that's with Haaland in particular, and maybe a little bit of Salah as well. I think that's one of the big things you have to remember is that if you don't own these big premiums and they do return, which is obviously why they're at premium prices, at such an early point in the season, that could seriously, you're not going to win FPL from game week 2, but you certainly could be out of the race by game week 2 if Haaland turns up against a newly promoted side. You could see him bagging a hat trick, 4, maybe even 5 goals. Last season against Luton in the cup, he bagged 5 after I think it was an hour. So yeah, for me, I think at the start when FPL first released, Haaland wasn't in my radar. However, that has changed now, and he is definitely among the first names on that team sheet. Okay, thank you guys so much for watching this video. If you have enjoyed it, don't forget to drop a thumbs up and subscribe down below. I just want to say thank you guys so much for all the recent support on my videos. You know, the views, everything has just been going so well. The likes, the comments, just thank you all so much for anyone who takes the time just to subscribe, drop a thumbs up. Even if you just watch the video, just thank you so much. I'm going to be back with a few more videos this week. I'm going to try and get sort of 4 or 5 out for you guys this week. So I'm gonna upload this one. I've got a video coming out where I'm going to be reacting to some of your guys' drafts. I've got a few of them sent in via my Twitter, which I'm going to just do a little plug now. I'll put it on screen. It's at FPL__ Yusuf. So I've just created that now. So if you guys are on Twitter or X as they call it now, just don't forget to drop me a follow down there. I'm trying to interact with as many people as I can. So yeah, I'm going to do a video reacting to your guys' drafts. I'm going to do a video reacting to my draft, my current draft that I've got. Like I said in the video, Haaland's in there now. So it's a little bit different to the one that I released. I've got to do a video about FPL challenge. So we've got a lot of content coming over the next few days and few weeks as we start to get closer and closer to that game week 1 deadline. Like I said, if you have enjoyed it, don't forget to drop a thumbs up and subscribe down below, and I'll catch you guys next time.